Okay, everybody, are we ready to get stuck in? Are we ready? You ready for some ruchnius, for some holiness? So we're learning Mesillas Yesharim. We're learning the Ramchal's holy work. We're speaking on the last paragraph. I know James has got a copy there, so we're going to speak about the last paragraph of the chapter of purity, and then move over, please God, to chapter 17 in a few moments. So the last paragraph of chapter 16 is the idea of serving Hashem with purity, which we said last week. A quick recap is when you do an action, it's not merely what you do, it's why you do it. It's your motivation. It's why do you do what you do. So we said last week, why are you joining us to learn Torah tonight? Are you that bored? Or is there other reasons? I hope there's other reasons. I really hope so. And those other reasons are what's critical. And now we're going to learn something so beautiful, and we're going to connect it to love and relationships. Here we go. Says the Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 110, Amud Beis. Rachmana liba bo'e, which means Hashem desires your heart. Isn't that one of the most beautiful things ever? Hashem desires your heart. What does it mean, Hashem desires your heart? It means, as the Ramchal says, Hashem isn't satisfied with your deeds alone in the performance of mitzvahs. Rather, what's important to Hashem is that your heart be pure so that you can direct itself towards the true service of Hashem. The heart is the king, the rules over the body, and if it does not rouse itself to serve Hashem, the service of other limbs is meaningless, for they will go where the spirit of the heart takes them. As it says in the book of Proverbs, Tnovni libchali, my son, give your heart to me. Meaning what? So I think it's easier first to use the moshel, use the analogies, the metaphor of love. Because really, as we said many, many times, our religion, Torah, Judaism, is not about a ritual. It's a relationship. It's a relationship between us and Hashem. So let's look at the metaphor between the relationship of soulmates. I asked my wife, I said to her when I read this, I said, darling, do you desire my heart? I said to her, do you desire my heart? And she's absolutely, it was probably the most absolute answer she's ever given me in my 28 and a half years marriage. She was like, spot on. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell you ever since I met you, right? What does that mean? Meaning that in a relationship, it's not about, she doesn't want flowers, even though she likes them. She doesn't even want jewelry, even though she kind of likes them. But if I buy her jewelry and flowers, that's not going to make her feel secure that I love her. What's going to make her feel secure that I love her will be that she knows she has my heart. She knows that my priorities in my life are to make her joyous and to make her happy and to look after her. In a relationship, and therefore when you do an act of romance, an act of goodness, it's not about the act. It's about why you do it. And especially a woman knows, men aren't as clever as that, but women are much more gifted in knowing when the partner's got the heart involved, when it's really the heart. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, and Susan, if you're there, will say this Mishnah in Le'ilu Nishmas your mother, because the Mishnah is acronym Neshama. It's a beautiful thing if any of you know that. If you've got people in the higher worlds and in Gan Eden, a nice thing to do for someone you love who's in Gan Eden is to say a Mishnah for them. So we'll say this Mishnah from Pirkei Avot in merit of Susan's mother. And the Mishnah says the following. In Pirkei Avos, chapter 5, Mishnah 19, James is normally good at putting it on the screen within 3 seconds of me saying it. So let's count how many seconds James puts it on the screen. Pirkei Avos, chapter 5, number 19. Says the Mishnah, Kol ava shituloi b'dava. Any love that's dependent on a condition, when batel dava, when the condition evaporates, betela ava, the love goes. If you marry someone based on looks, apart from me, it doesn't normally last forever, right? If you marry someone based on money, you can't assume, thank you James, you can't assume that money will last forever. If you marry someone based on anything, what happens when that thing goes away? So you should love someone based on nothing, no thing. And the Mishnah says, "V'she'ena t'lo b'davar," but if it's love, which is unconditional love, which is love which is not based on a thing, then eina b'teil la'olam. It never goes away. It never ever goes away. It's love which lasts forever. And he brings two examples, says the Mishnah. Ezu avoshu t'lo b'davar. What's the embodiment of love which is conditional? It was the love between Amnon and Tamar. You have to look at the story of Amnon and Tamar. And she'ena t'lo b'davar zu avas David v'Yonasan. The love and the incredible friendship of King David and Jonathan was a friendship of unconditional, selfless love. And that's the paradigm of how we should love each other. Let me ask you a question. In this week's Sedra, we just learned with Yaakov and Rachel, with Jacob and Rachel, it seemed to say, there's a pasuk which says, and Rachel was very beautiful. It says, V'Rachel hifas maresh, she was beautiful. Why would it say she's beautiful? It almost seems to say that would be a reason why Jacob would fall in love with her. But we learned in Eishes Chayil, Sheka hachein vehevel hayofi, that the beauty it's false. So what does it mean she was beautiful? So from here we see that the beauty that it says about Rachel in this week's Parsha wasn't physical beauty per se, it was a spiritual kind of beauty. It was a beauty which was a replica and a partnership for the beauty that Jacob had. They were soulmates. He saw that with Rachel, that was his way of serving Hashem. He understood that was his other half. And therefore it was anything but conditional. It was unconditional love. And therefore with that, now we can go back to Hashem. So therefore our relationship with Hashem should be not for any ulterior motives. You know, when I speak to certain young people looking to get married, I ask them, like, why do you want to get married? Why do you want to get married? So some might say, because I'm lonely. So I'll say, okay, but that's not the ultimate reason. The ultimate reason is actually in order to give. Ideally to give to Hashem. Nice to see you, Natalie. In order to give to Hashem, meaning God's asked us to be in relationships. Hashem's asked us to get under the chuppah and fuse our souls together and bring the yud and the hey of Hashem's name together. The Arizal says that 90% of our world to come, for those who are married, is how we treat our spouse. Very hard work. Because that's the greatest embodiment of love and giving. But what I'm getting at too, I really recommend those of you who are single to try and access your higher self and say, Hashem, please help me get married, not for me, but for you. Because you, Hashem, has mandated that the world, for it to be progress, the way you want, the way your prototype and manifest is for us to find our soulmate and to serve you through that relationship. So for that reason, let me get married. In other words, and then when you find someone, and this is one of the problems with people in relationships, there's too much conditions going on. There's too much selfishness going on. There's too much, you're not giving me what I want. You're not giving me what I want. You're not meeting my needs. If it's not about meeting needs, if it's not about conditions, if it's about actually the act of giving and giving each other your heart unconditionally, and that's really what it should be when you get under that chuppah. You're giving each other's heart unconditionally. That's the way to have an incredibly beautiful, unconditional love, eternal future. Now back to Hashem, here we go. The reason why you should be learning Torah tonight, everybody. Why should you be here joining me on Zoom and on Facebook tonight? Because hopefully you love Hashem. And Hashem's said, spend some time with me. Spend some time learning my words, getting closer, building your relationship. And the more you get close and build your relationship, the more you're giving Hashem your heart, because is that what he wants? He doesn't want you merely to do an act which you don't really enjoy, or an act that you don't understand, and go one ritual after another ritual. My friends, spirituality, Torah, is about giving Hashem your heart, because it's that which he wants. And I think that's such a beautiful idea. It's so beautiful, and you've got to start thinking then, which mitzvahs do you do altruistically? Which mitzvahs do you do unconditionally? Which mitzvahs do you do for Hashem? And what are you actually doing for yourself? What are you doing for society? What are you doing for peer pressure? When I have my students who convert to Judaism, Same idea. If you want to convert because I'm in a relationship, not going to work. What you should say, I'm in a relationship with God. And that's why I want to convert. Now, that would be a beautiful thing to say to the Bet Din. If you go to the court when the Bet Din say, why do you want to convert? To say I'm in a relationship with Hashem, that's a beautiful reason. That's the reason. But unfortunately, too many times in conversion, it's for actually even just cultural identity. It could be for one's in a relationship with another human being, and there's all sorts of reasons why people convert other than for Hashem, and that's really the goal. And for us, who are part of the Jewish people, we all are converts in a way. We converted at Har Sinai. For those of us, we need to look. I need to think, when I'm going to shul, am I going to shul because actually I need to ask Hashem for lots of things, so it's a selfish exercise? Am I going to shul because, like, oh my gosh, the rabbi needs to go to shul. If he's not going to shul, everyone's going to say the rabbi's not in shul. So I hope that's not the reason I go to shul. I need to go to shul because I love Hashem, and Hashem loves me, and He wants to have a chat. I'm doing it because I'm giving Hashem my heart, and that's what He's asking of me. And if you start looking at that, maybe some of the mitzvahs that you struggle with, maybe some of the mitzvahs that maybe you find hard, let's say within Shabbat, it's inconvenient, it's hard, but if you're not doing it for you, if you're doing it because Hashem's asked you to spend some time with Him, and you're giving Hashem your heart, maybe certain mitzvahs could become easier. Anyway, so this is the first idea. That's the end of chapter 16. Let's begin now chapter 17. Just before we do that, I want to say an idea from the Kedushas Levi, one of my favorites. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev said the following. He asked a very deep question, which some of you, I hope, during these sedras should be thinking about, which is, we're taught in the Talmud that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, our forefathers and patriarchs and matriarchs, they all kept the Torah. They kept Shabbos. They kept kosher. They wore tefillin. How did they know to do it? The Torah wasn't given. Hopefully you've thought of this question. It says Jacob went to learn Torah last week for 14 years. As someone asked me at my Shabbos table this week, what was he learning? The Torah wasn't given. The Talmud wasn't written yet. Is that a good question, everyone? Top question. So let me explain to you what the Kedushas Levi, Levi Yitzchak Berditchev says. He says the following. There's natural cravings within a person. And if you had any of them, the last time you were hungry, the last time you were tired, right? Your body has innate natural cravings. I just saw my wife with a beautiful piece of chicken, and I'll be frank, I got a bit of a physical craving. I haven't eaten yet, right? So let's put it in the oven during my share. So that was a body craving. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says there's something called neshama cravings. The neshama has cravings. Your soul has cravings. And the cravings are to do what Hashem desires. And this craving is as natural for the neshama as hunger is for the body. So there's some diseases which can interfere with a person's appetite and doesn't allow you to feel hungry. The proper treatment of these diseases will allow the natural feeling of hunger to return. It's equally true of the soul, my friends. It's equally true of your neshama, which is part of God Himself. It's attracted to doing. Your neshama innately wants to do Hashem's will because your neshama is part of Hashem. And the reason at times we don't experience this innate craving is because, in a way, there's a spiritual illness. There's these barriers which are erected by the Yetzer Hara, which drive us to physical gratifications. It was that which maybe, I need to have that chicken tonight. And that's obscured the natural cravings of the neshama. So the Avos and Imahos, the patriarchs and matriarchs, was so completely devoted to the divine will. This is what I'm really hoping that you're going to get to. They eliminated all their own personal interests, and this permitted the neshama to function in such a matter that it guided the body to do mitzvahs. Are you with me? So my friends, your neshama, if you could listen to it, if you could learn how to put up the volume, it's saying, I want to do Hashem's will. I want to be learning Torah with Rabbi Hill right now. I want to give charity. I want to say Psalms. I want to say Shema. This is all what Hashem wants. The problem is that, unfortunately, the soul's volume is on mute, and the Yetzer Hara's volume is on super high. The evil inclination's volume is on very high, which was obviously on high for me. When I saw the chicken, it's like, I need to eat, right? That was what I was hearing. You need to drink. I've got my my drink in front of me, right? When you're tired, I need to. So we're so on the Shama's volume, on the Shama's voice is so obscured, we don't get a chance to hear it. Says the Kedushas Levi, the spiritual level of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was that they managed to put on mute their Yetzer Hara, and they just heard very clearly the craving of their neshama. And that's his explanation for how they knew to keep all the mitzvahs. And then he explains one more idea. Hashem has made Yosha straight. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't live a straight life because through our calculations and our deviations. But our innate self is straight. Yashar. So it says in Koheles. And that's why the Avos and Imahos are called the Sefer Yosha, the book of the straight. One of the names of the Jewish people is Yesharim, straight to the highest level. So this is the idea that if we can just go back to our innate child spiritual self, it's all there. Our soul knows what it needs to do. Hashem's transmitting to our soul the whole time all of Hashem's needs and desires for us. Unfortunately, often we get in the way and we obscure that sound. And we can get access to that higher sound through purity, through loving Hashem. Okay, let's start chapter 17 now, everybody. So everyone who's got your books there, let us start together. Now chapter 17, which is really exciting. So we're moving fast through this holy book, everybody. And as I said, I'm super excited one day to have a party with you all. Hopefully when Mashiach comes, when we finished it. But if not, at least a Zoom party to celebrate the finishing and the completion of this holy book. Okay, chapter 17. This is how, says the Ramchal, we acquire purity. We acquire purity. One last idea, though, from the Rambam I just recalled. Maimonides writes the following. There's a Talmud in Makot, page 23b, which says a famous pasuk, which is, by the way, the one that the Rabbi says every time you want to get to Kaddish, to Rabbanan, where he says, Rotza Kodesh Baruch Hu wants to lezakos et Yisrael, to love you and to confer merit upon the Jewish people. So how does he confer merit upon us? He gives us so many Torah mitzvot. That's why we have 613 and all the rabbinic. And every moment there's opportunities to serve Hashem because Hashem loves us so much. Says the Rambam, a very novel approach. He writes the following. He said it's fundamental that even in your lifetime, you at least take one single mitzvah, but you do that properly, correctly, with all your heart, without any ulterior motive, for this, what we call l'shem shamayim, for loving Hashem. So I really like you to think about that. Think about that over the coming days. Your homework for this week. What is your one mitzvah? What is your number one mitzvah, which maybe was why you're here in this world? For some people it's charity, for some people it's learning Torah, for some people it's having guests, for some people it's going to visit the sick, whatever it may be. Try and own a mitzvah and then specifically work on doing that mitzvah with purity, selflessly. As Maimonides says, at least have one mitzvah that you're doing all in. You're going all in and you're almost perfecting and specializing that mitzvah. And that is a reason why you're here in this world. So that's the conclusion of chapter 16. Let's start chapter 17, which is called Knias Tahara. How do you acquire purity, everybody? How do you acquire purity? Okay, now I have to start thinking. That was like a nice introduction. This is now gets a little bit complicated. How do you acquire this? So listen to what he says. He says like this. Step one is how to acquire it. Is when you contemplate and examine the base nature of the pleasures of the world. Nice to see you, Junior, on Facebook. And their benefits, as I've written previously, you will find them repulsive. In other words, if you could start, we spoke a bit about this last week. Think of a dessert which actually makes you ill physically. Maybe some of you get ill with alcohol. Some of you have physical negative symptoms. You know, for me, smoking, such a disgusting habit, right? You've got to start thinking, what is it that gives you physical cravings, but is morally and spiritually repulsive and repugnant? Have a think what that is. Because as the Ramchal, if we can just learn how to step back and just objectively look at the very entity that you are craving and just to see, is this good? Is this bad? Is this nice? Is this actually repulsive? For any, I don't know why I'm sharing this with you, but I'll share it with you. Right, there was a while, I do love my crisps. As those of you who know me, I do love my crisps. And this is one of the reasons I look as I look. And there was a while, especially when Pringles came out, that was a very exciting crisp. And they literally say, like, once you stop popping, you can't stop, right? And for me, it was very, very easy to manage to finish a whole huge tub of Pringles within half an hour. And what was really funny, not funny, it's really pretty repulsive. Afterwards, I really didn't feel good. It really felt just pretty awful, right? You don't feel like, I feel really light and strong now, right? You don't feel that. You feel like, what have I just done? Right, exactly. Once you pop, you can't stop. And how many of you do things similar when actually you step back and objectively it's like, this is not good for your soul. This is not even nice. Like the idea of finishing a whole thing of Pringles within half an hour is not healthy. It's not positive in any shape, way or form. And I really shouldn't touch it, even to start it. So this is what the Ramchal is saying here. To learn to step back, think what's actually obscure and crude. And it says when you become absolutely clear that these things are defects and are ills, it will no doubt be easier to disassociate. It's funny again. For me, I had this innate feeling that smoking was just one of the most repulsive, disgusting habits. And Baruch Hashem, that's one of the reasons why I've never smoked in my life. What's really hard though, if any of you have this, those who do smoke, or those who do popping their Pringles till and you can't stop. Those who are, and by the way, you're having your Pringles and your Haagen-Dazs ice cream at the same time with some kettle chips, right? With a glass of wine. If you're doing all that, and then you feel sick afterwards, once you're addicted to something, it's much harder to stop. And I'm afraid when you're actually in the phase of being addicted, this doesn't really work by itself. You need a more dramatic, I think you need to pray, to be honest. Or you need to call Rabbi Hill, who'll give you some coaching, who'll be able to help you get away with your addictions. But there's specific methods to defeat the addictions. I think the Ramchal, though, is speaking really maybe when it's not that totally addictive. It depends, if you're having like a few cans of beer every night, that's a problem. Like when you're having things in moderation, it can be okay. To have a glass of wine on Shabbos, one other glass of wine in the week, that's beautiful. If you start having 3 glasses every night, that's a problem. Or even worse, a bottle a night. Depends how big the bottle is, Tzvi, of your beer. Depends how big. But without getting into Tzvi's size bottle of beer, I think you're getting the point, which is you need to look at what is it that you're physically craving. Is it kosher? Is it positive? Is it healthy? Is it disgusting? Is it filthy habits? And once you start objectively, intellectually seeing that it's something pretty disgusting, hopefully, Be'ez Hashem, you'll stop wanting it as much. Now, as I said to you, I think that really works when you haven't become addicted to it. Once you become addicted, then you need prayer. Then you need some much more radical treatment. And then let's continue the Ramchal. He says, therefore, the more you're able to develop a deep and enduring awareness of the base nature of the body and its pleasures, then the easier it will be for you to purify your thoughts and your heart and totally prevent them from drawing towards the evil Yetzer Hara. So, for example, imagine, an angel, a malach, has no desire for your beer, has no desire for Natalie's chocolates, has no desire for my Pringles, because it's not interested. One jot. An angel is above that. So we've got to start looking at ourselves more as angelic. Our soul is the angel within us. So that side of us, the God side of us, has zero interest in the beer, the chocolate, the extra sleep, the physical cravings. And if you start, therefore, do you, and I'm asking you you now, I'm asking you, all of you, do you view yourself as a body or as a neshama? Who are you? If you view yourself, Verda's there in Turkey, if Verda is your body, what you see in the mirror is you've got to have a problem. But if you understand that the part of you which is you is that inner side of you, your real heart, the part of you which will be with you in this world and then in the next world, the part of you that stays with you when you sleep and goes up to a higher world, the real, your inner higher level thoughts, your higher consciousness. That's the real, you're the soul in you. I would say even, it's not the physical heart, by the way, Verda, when we're talking about the heart. It doesn't mean your physical heart. It means your spiritual heart, which is really more your higher consciousness, your thoughts. And again, when we talk about the mind, it's not your brain, it's your mind. It's how your desires. That's who you are. And therefore, it's your spiritual desires is the real you. The cravings you have to do good. You know, I just went outside for a breath of fresh air before we started tonight. And just my muzzle. Someone came past to ask for tzedakah, to ask for charity. But it was my muzzle. So again, my Yetzer Hara is like, oh my gosh, how unlucky was that I managed to go out for a breath of fresh air. And just at that moment, someone's asking for money, but then my neshama straight away said, Baruch Hashem, obviously I needed to give charity then. It was an opportunity to give to someone that's needed. Thank God I opened the door at that very moment to be able to help him. So do you see, we're facing this conflict the whole time between your lower self, and the body wants to be selfish, wants to be lazy, wants to have pleasure, wants to indulge. But if you realize that's not who you are is your soul, your neshama. And therefore, it's a craving to do good, to be close to Hashem, to pray, to help, to do mitzvahs. That's the real you. Once you start realizing that's the real you, Be'ez Hashem, then that's one way to disattach from some of the cravings, from some of the elements which make us impure. Then he writes like this, however, in the same matter, says the Ramchal, that we divided purity of thought into two separate categories, one in reference to physical deeds, and the other in reference to deeds devoted to the service of Hashem. Likewise, the intellectual effort we need to acquire, it falls also into two categories. Here we go. What are the two categories? That's in order to purify one's thought, which is what we're talking about. You've got to, on one hand, types of deeds devoted to the service of Hashem, and expand your awareness of the delusory nature of honor. So this is now a new area. So one thing we're speaking about is your cravings for physicality, not healthy. Natalie, leave the chocolate. You don't need the chocolate. You need spiritual chocolate. You need Shabbos. You need Tehillim, Psalms, spiritual sweet chocolate. Torah is one of the sweetest things. That's the chocolate you need. That's one. But then there's another area, which is some people, kavod, honor, power, glory, fame, massaging your ego is what drives us. And the Ramchal says these are deceptions which you need to train yourself to flee. It says in Pirkei Avos, if you run away from kavod, that's when actually, ironically, kavod comes after you. Right? People will look up to you much more and give you more credence and love if you're not seeking honor. I think hopefully you're spiritually aware enough to spot someone who's seeking honor, who's doing it for their own personal glory and not for Hashem's glory. And that's unfortunately not why we're here. Then the Ramchal says, consequently, when you're occupied with serving Hashem, then you'll be cleansed of the influence that comes from the admiration and praise of one's fellows, and his thought will be directed solely towards Hashem. As it says in Deuteronomy, Hu sihilasecha v'hu elekecha. He is your praise and he is your Shem. So the only one you should ever praise is Hashem. You should never be, as I said, seeking praise. I said to you probably a few times, I was so many talks, I had the opportunity of being with Rabbi Tats, and at the end, when people clapped when he finished, he goes like that. He was like, no, Jewish people don't clap. We don't clap. And I think one of the reasons he didn't want people to clap, the last thing he wanted was to feel that people were admiring him or congratulating him, because he was just giving out. And that's what I try and do as well. You're just giving out. We're just messengers. We're just channels of Torah, trying to give you Torah. It's nothing about the people giving it. So there's a nice, beautiful story, again, from one of my favorite tzaddikim, the Kedushas Levi. Listen to this nice story. So he had, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was leading the congregation on Simchat Torah, and there's a prayer called Ata Hareisa, which is how we start in the Nusach Sfat services. But he saw Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, the whole shul saw Rabbi Levi Yitzchak put on his talis. He paused, removed it, and put it on again, only to remove it again. Like they were waiting for the rabbi, and the rabbi kept putting on his talis, off his talis, on his talis, off his talis. At a certain point, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok suddenly cried out to the talis, if you're a scholar and a chassid, then you lead the congregation, Natar Reisa. And he left the pulpit. He walked out of the synagogue. So they asked Rabbi Yitzchok what was going on there. Why were you talking to your talis? That does not look the most healthiest thing. So says Rabbi Yitzchok the following. He goes, just as I was to put on my talis, I noted someone in my head saying, wait a minute. Psh, can you see why they're asking you to do it? They're asking you to do it because you're so great. Because you're so at that point, he wasn't happy. He wasn't happy. And at a certain point, he said to his Yetzer Hara, if you want it, then you put on the talis. But I'm out of here. In other words, he spotted that little bit of pride and that little bit of psh. They're asking you because you're the rabbi. He wasn't having it. He ran off so quickly, which is the most beautiful idea. Most beautiful idea, right? Because sometimes, think of it in your life. Maybe you want someone to call on you. You want someone to say, oh, you're very important. And therefore we need you to do that. But actually that's coming from a place of ego normally. It's coming from a place of arrogance. And real greatness is someone who runs away from that. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'd like you to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you've got the wrong guy. Obviously I can't do it. Maybe me and my brother. That should be the reaction of a Jewish leader. And it's so the opposite if you look at it in the political world, when everyone's backstabbing and everyone wants to be the leader and wants to be the leader for their own purpose, for their own ego, for their own money situation. And that's not a spiritual Jewish leader. Oh, another story about Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. His whole life, should I just say, his whole life embodied the idea of we're here to serve Hashem for Hashem, not for us. And actually, if I'm going to get any credit, I'm out. I don't even want to be part of it. Because you have to understand, if you get credit and the Yetzer Hara start saying, psh, look at me, look at what I've achieved, Hashem stops working through you. He's like, no. Because the Talmud says there's one thing that I can't stand to be with you, if you're arrogant. If you're arrogant, we can't really have a relationship. So we started tonight about the fact that Hashem wants our heart. But if our ego is getting in the way and our ego is saying, psh, look at me, look how great I am, Hashem can't get in. So that's what we need to work on. Then I'll teach you now the next idea the Ramchal says. Here we go. You ready for this? Says the Ramchal, the next area of preparing for purity is preparation. What do we mean? He writes like this, and I'll try and explain it in my words. He says, you should not approach the fulfillment of a mitzvah impulsively. When your presence of mind is deficient and you can't think clearly about what you're doing. Rather, you should arouse yourself and patiently prepare your heart until you enter the state of contemplation. And then you should contemplate what Hashem is planning to do, and therefore before you're planning to do it. Meaning what? Let me explain to you. And this is one of the things that Hasidim brought to the world. I've said to some of you before, it's really interesting whether Ramchal is the Ramchal more of a Baal Shem Tov Yid or a Vilna Gaon Yid. The Gaon of Vilna is very rational, very intellectual. The Baal Shem Tov was about full of love and full of mysticism, and it's actually very hard to work out sometimes the Ramchal. It seems like a bridging both worlds. Over here, this is very much a Baal Shem Tov concept, which is the following. Before you started learning tonight, and please, I urge you to try and do this next week. Maybe 2 minutes to 8. You don't just come on at 8 o'clock. 2 minutes before, maybe you stop. You kind of clear your mind. Maybe you say a prayer. And you get yourself in the mindset that you're ready to receive Hashem's Torah. You're ready to receive something up from high. You start maybe asking yourself, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because it's a mitzvah in the Torah. I'm doing this because Hashem wants my heart. I'd love to continue to develop my relationship with Hashem. You're meant to prepare yourself. You don't just rush in. And then, because if any of you have rushed in, I'm sure the first 5-10 minutes, you're probably thinking about the things you rushed in with and stressing about those thoughts. And the same idea when it comes to prayer. How many people, when it comes to prayer, they just like run and just open the siddur and they just start praying? If you do that, You're going to miss half the prayers because you're still going to be caught up in your thoughts, still going to be caught up in your worries, still going to be caught up in your stresses. And therefore, it's pivotal to actually, before you pray, to actually stop, do some meditation, do some asking yourself why I'm doing what I'm doing, get yourself in the right mood, get yourself in the right mindset. So for example, I spoke to one of our students, Anita, maybe you're listening tonight, and Anita wants to go to Kever Rachel, wants to go to Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem in Israel. It's a very, very beautiful place to pray. If any of you haven't prayed there, please do that next time you go to Israel. You know, Rachel Mavaka Boneh, Rachel cries for her children. She's the one who can advocate for the Jewish people in a way that no one else can. It's a beautiful place to pray. But I said, don't just go to the tomb. I said, prepare yourself. Learn a bit about it before you go. And actually, there's a beautiful song, which you can listen to if you want later tonight, from Shweki, about what's called Mama Rachel Cries. It's a song about Rachel crying for us. It's a beautiful song. So I love my music. So often before I would go to the Western Wall, before I went to Kever Rachel, I got myself in the mood, sometimes through music, listening through music. And I'm sure some of you do it, right? Some of you maybe, if you go to a Lahavdil, we shouldn't be comparing, but if you go to a concert, often you listen to some of the songs that you're going to hear before you go. Why? Because you're getting yourself in the mood, right? You're just like prepping. You're just like, because you don't want to just get there. You want to be in that mood. So spirituality has the same idea. Before Shabbos comes in, you shouldn't just you're working, Shabbos is in. Okay, Shabbos. The last half an hour before Shabbos comes in, put on some Shabbos songs. Go on YouTube, right? Listen to some Shlomo Carlebach, how Shlomo Carlebach brings in Shabbos, his Kabbalah Shabbos with Shlomo Carlebach. That's what I do. I start, I use before a Yom Tov comes in, you listen to some songs about that festival. Hanukkah's going to come. It's going to be our next festival. Don't just when it's dark on the 25th of Kislev, light the menorah. First of all, learn some of the Torah the week before, just to get yourself in the mood, to get yourself in the mindset of Hanukkah. And then, even if there's some beautiful songs, and if you ask me which are the songs, Rabbi, I'm happy to send you some really beautiful Hanukkah songs, or Hanukkah stories, or Hanukkah bits of inspiration, just to get you in the mood that then that moment when you light the menorah, you're going to light up the world. Not just light the menorah. Your job is to light up the world. And even before you light the menorah, don't just I light the menorah. Even before you say the blessing, stop. And just I'm about to say the blessing. That's why Hasidim would say a prayer before a mitzvah. And the prayer is called L'Shem Yichud. They would make a whole paragraph. By the way, again, let's understand. So let's say you're lighting the menorah. So lighting the menorah, Chazal, our sages knew, let's get in the mood. So we make a blessing first. We actually make 3 blessings on the first night of lighting the menorah. Because one of the ideas is to make the blessing is getting you in the mood. Before you do the mitzvah, you are directing your attention and your heart to Hashem. But Hasidim said and saw that even making the blessing was very ritualistic. We're not thinking of the blessing. So they made another paragraph that before the blessing, you make another paragraph of meditation, a paragraph of just accessing why you're doing what you're doing. Do you realize the spiritual enormity of what you're doing? And only when you're there and you've clocked on and you're ready. And by the way, I really recommend the same, let's say if you're going on a date. If you're going on a date, because please God, you want to get married, don't just go straight from work into the date. You're not going to be yourself. You're not going to give of yourself in the best way. It's important just to maybe go home for a little bit. And then I said maybe listen to a beautiful Shweki song about getting married. Right? Mehera, Ashebara, some beautiful songs. Get into some spiritual mode of I'm doing this for Hashem, I'm doing this to try and get under the chuppah, and that just elevates the whole experience. Say some Tehillim first. Tehillim is also one of the greatest ways of getting in the mood spiritually. King David's Psalms. I can't think of anything that you shouldn't do before. In other words, let Tehillim be a prep for that mitzvah. That's another way to really prepare yourself before you jump in. Because as I said, you make Kiddush on Friday night, that could be life-changing. That could bring Mashiach if you do it the right way. But if you're just okay, let's make Kiddush now. It's one of the reasons we sing Shalom Aleichem first. We welcome the angels. We then sing Eshes Chayil. We do some prep because we're getting ready. So then hopefully Kiddush becomes a very dramatic, powerful experience. And that's what the Ramchal's saying here. You need to have a time to contemplate prior to the mitzvah. And I'll recommend, if anyone wants to see one of the most beautiful prayers, see if James can find it. I'll be super impressed, James, if you can find it and send it on our Zoom and Facebook. It's called the prayer of the Noam Elimelech, a big Kabbalist called Rav Elimelech of Lezhensk. He wrote a beautiful, beautiful prayer that you're meant to say before you pray. And in my Siddur and Hasidic Siddurs, it's there at the preparation. It's the intro to prayer. And it's beautiful. It starts talking about Hashem, help me divorce myself from my Yetzer Hara. Help me be doing this for the right reasons. Help me access my love for the Jewish people. Because when you're meant to pray, I don't know if you're aware, you're meant to be praying for everybody. It shouldn't be like a selfish experience. Oh my gosh, James, you're the man. You're the man. You're on it, all over it. Totally forget about being under the weather now. The illness will just pass like we split the Red Sea. So read that beautiful prayer. Try and the one that James has put in. James, if you could do even a bigger mitzvah, put it on Facebook as well for all our Facebook buddies. Right, let them see it as well. And it's a beautiful prayer, and I really recommend at least one day of your life before you pray, say the Noam Elimelech's prayer. It's gorgeous. I'm sure Tzvi says it often. And I had the merit of saying it at his grave. You know, I'm a big grave hopper. I love going to these Tzadikim's graves because it's kosher grave hopping. It's spiritual grave hopping. It's kind of good grave hopping because it enables me to get closer to Hashem, because then when you go to these places, they are praying for you and your family and elevating your prayers. So the Noam Elimelech in Lezhensk, in Poland, I managed to sing his song. And again, there's a beautiful song that he wrote, which is in the prayer. It's called Adarabba. And again, if you look on YouTube, Adarabba, there's a song, Adarabba, from the words of the Noam Elimelech, which is about the importance. It's on Facebook as well. James is the man tonight, all over it. Even though I shouldn't congratulate someone too much, James, I wouldn't want you to get a big head. So James is channeling God's divine light tonight, but it's actually nothing to do with you, James, whatsoever. You're just lucky to be a channel tonight. Does that make sense? Hopefully you got what I'm trying to say. Anyway. So I hope, by the way, that's another reason you're meant to do a mikveh. You go to the mikveh before a mitzvah. Again, Hasidim will go to the mikveh before prayer. You know, when I was in Uman, I spent probably more time in the mikveh than anywhere else because you're doing so many mitzvahs, you've got to go to the mikveh first. So like on Rosh Hashanah, before Rosh Hashanah, there's a mikveh before Shacharis, and then there's another mikveh before Rosh Hashanah, and then there's another mikveh before the like you're literally mikveh dipping the whole way through Rosh Hashanah and pre-Rosh Hashanah, because before you do a mitzvah, you go before the shofar, let's go in the mikveh. And there was mitzvahs galore, so it was mikveh galore, right? So you have to understand why we do the mikveh, because it's also to prepare ourselves and to cleanse ourselves and to purify ourselves to be ready to receive. Because again, what we're doing tonight, if your vessel was pure, and if you'd managed to get the static out of the way, and the Yetzer Hara out of the equation, this incredible divine light can start overwhelming you in the most beautiful way. But if we're not feeling in a pure place, if we've just literally come from the gym and or come from work and your head's in a million places and you're trying, your body's in the room with me now, but your mind and soul isn't, there's a limit to what the Torah can achieve to you. And that's why one of the blessings we say before we learn Torah, before we do a mitzvah, is Asher Kiddishanu. It should spiritualize us. It should transform us. Spirituality, tonight's class should be potentially, ideally transformative. It shouldn't be merely informative. It should be transformative, but it's only going to transform if you're ready to be transformed. If you're in a state that's ready for growth. If you're in a state that's ready to really receive higher wisdom, to receive a divine light. If we're in a state of lowness. That's why some people, if you're in a low place, if someone's depressed, if someone's stressed, it's very hard to get the joy and the light in because you're blocking it. Like the door's locked from the divine light, God forbid. So we have to learn to open the door beforehand. So what I'm trying to advise you, according to the words of the Ramchal, is before you pray, before you do a mitzvah, before you date, get yourself in the right mode. Get yourself in the right mood. Get your headspace right. Go to the mikveh, say some psalms, listen to shweki, do whatever you need to do to get yourself in the mood. That's why people often, let's say when I take my wife out for date night, the real goal is to try and get myself into okay, now I've got to give my heart to my wife, right? So now you have to bet, if I'm just doing that from a stressed day at work and super stressed, then I'm there at dinner, I'm not really there. And that's why, as I said, it's a beautiful metaphor, how someone dates, or how someone, let's say, how when I go out with my wife, I'm very into not having your phones. When I see people with their phones out when they're going out for a romantic dinner, that's ridiculous, because your head's in your phone, your thoughts are in your phone. So phones shouldn't be anywhere near the place. We should put your worries to the sides and just go to the experience you're going to exclusively ready for that experience. And that's what the Holy Ramchal is saying over here. And he continues to say like this. It's a book of Job. From Job it says, Im ata hachinoisa lebecha or parashta lav kapecha, which is if you prepared your heart, then you can spread your hand towards him. My dear friends, you've got to learn how to prepare your heart. To give your heart, you've got to prepare your heart. How do we do that? As we said, we've got many, many ways to do that. One of the ways to prepare your heart is to learn maybe to sacrifice, to learn to take some of those indulgences and cravings and physical desires that was giving your own ego, and learn to put that aside. That's what King Solomon says, Sumera. First of all, stop from evil, and then asitov, then you do good. So there's so many methods in how we prepare our heart. And this is all part of purity. Then, says the Ramchal, the factors that undermine this virtue then are, number one, insufficient examination, the lack of awareness, pursuit of honor, insufficient preparation. So the Ramchal says the first two factors sways a person's thinking, luring someone towards other motives. And he brings a very, very strong example. I hope everyone's over 18 here, right? Is everyone over 18? This is over 18 example. He says, like an adulteress who consorts unfaithfully with other men. That's a good example of these external orientated motives are called the adultery of the heart. So when we can cheat on Hashem, and that's why the famous verse in the Shema, V'lo yisasuru, acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareim. You shouldn't be searching, following your heart and your eyes, after which you tend to stray. So meaning, if you have desires which are away from God, let's just say, a good example, obviously a strong example, if any of you were into desiring, God forbid, other religions like idolatry, that would be obviously an example of adultery with Hashem. But there's more than that. Now, if you are desiring things that Hashem has asked you not to do, so let's say you're on the level where now you've been keeping kosher for a while, and then you're desiring some non-kosher foods, that's in a way cheating on God. That's your heart desiring something that Hashem has asked you not to do. Just like if a man cheats on his wife, God forbid. So but the tendency of the heart is to stray from the ideal perspective. Now we start understanding the depths of what Hashem wants your heart. Very deep. Because when people cheat, they're ostensibly, ironically, paradoxically, using their heart. They're saying, but I've fallen in love with someone else. My heart is desiring someone else. Because, that's why my wife wants my heart. Because if she hasn't got it, then someone else has got it. Right? The heart, isn't available for two people at the same time. You've got it, it's therefore for Hashem. Either we're giving it to Hashem or we're not. And if we're giving it to someone else, then Hashem doesn't have our heart. And then if we're giving it to someone else, then in a sense, we're cheating on God. And then he says the latter factor, preparing oneself insufficiently prevents the removal of one's heart. So let's even say you're going to do an act of kindness. Let's get in the mindset of that. If you're doing it kind of on the rush, that could be a problem. Let's just go a little bit deeper for the last few moments. He says like this. So as I said, check out that beautiful prayer from Elimelech of Legends that James, through being a channel, has given you on Zoom and Facebook. But I'll give you another story. So for example, the son of the great scholar of Shlomo Eiger, he actually changed from being a Litvak to a Chassid. He became a follower of the Rebbe of Kotsk. Before returning home, he asked the Rebbe, what am I going to tell my dad if he asks, with what right can you pray the allotted time by the Shulchan Aruch? One of the things Hasidim do is they'll sometimes daven after sunset, mincha, the afternoon prayer. That's one of the big debates between the Hasidic movement and the non-Hasidic movement, or what, Hasidim will daven even when it's kind of pretty dark in the sky. And those who are from the Lithuanian background got very upset about that. So what did the Rebbe say? Listen to this amazing answer from the Kotsker Rebbe. He said, tell him that the Rambam rules that if one hires a worker to chop wood, and the worker spends time sharpening his axe, he must pay for the time spent preparing the tools for the assigned task, because that's an integral part of the job. And he writes, this liberty could only be taken by those who, upon rising at dawn, devoted all their time prior to prayers and preparation. Meaning that in your career, let me ask you, in your career, let's say you've got a really important project, which begins at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. And if you've got a project at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, there is no way that you just walk in from your house or from the pub or from the restaurant and whatever, from a cafe, and the project, 10 o'clock, you start. You're there however much time beforehand you need to prepare to get yourself ready for the 10 o'clock start. Some of you might need to go 2 hours before, 3 hours before. You don't just jump into the big meeting from the street. You spend time preparing. So the Kotsker Rebbe is saying it takes time to prepare for prayer. So there's so much that we need to do prior to that, so much what we need to do. I said that's one of the big notions of Hasidus, the notion of preparing for all mitzvahs, but specifically for prayer. In others, this story of Elimelech of Legends, I'll finish off with this. He says, I totally disregard people, he says, who tell me I'm a tzaddik. Because what do they know? Because can you imagine being very humble and being very great becomes a little bit of a problem, because there's people queuing up to see you, asking for blessings, saying, oh, the tzaddik, when you're introduced in public, there's these huge, crazy introductions. So Rabbi Melech said, I don't listen to it one jot. He says, even if Elijah the prophet would come and tell me I'm a tzaddik, I wouldn't believe him either. I'd say, no, you got it wrong. He goes, only maybe if Hashem himself would say to me, I'm a tzaddik, then I would got a big problem, because Hashem only can tell the truth. So only him I'm going to believe. However, I would be obligated to believe him only for that brief moment. And the next moment, I would know the truth that I'm not. I'm so far away from being a tzaddik, forget about it. The prophet says in Jeremiah, if a man conceals himself in a most secret place, will I not see him? Hashem sees you. Hashem knows you. In other words, your deepest, darkest, scariest secrets, that's the real you. There's no hiding place, so let's not get a big head about, whoa, I'm amazing. And Hashem can see that too. So the Baal Shem Tov says that this verse also should be read the following. If a man conceals himself in such a way that his service to Hashem is a secret to all, and therefore he thinks to be an I, he believes in his own sanctity, then I want to countenance with him, says Hashem. Meaning nothing is so repulsive to Hashem as a vain person. And that's what we're finishing off tonight. One of the ways to get in the way of pride, to get in the way of purity, is your own pride. If you're in a place of pride, if you're in a place of, I deserve, well, I think one of the biggest problems of today's generation, so many, especially young people, are self-entitled. It's like, I'm entitled to this, right? You go to a restaurant, you should be entitled to the best service. How many people have you heard say, but I'm paying for it? Just because you're paying for it doesn't mean you're paying for a big head. Doesn't mean you're paying for an ego, right? You're paying because you're choosing to indulge in that. And if Hashem would like you to have the experience easy, you'll have it easy. And if Hashem wants you to have it hard, you'll have it hard. So next time you go to a waitress, next time you go to a restaurant and the waitress doesn't give you what you order, don't say, outrageous, I want to speak to the manager right now for the money that I'm paying. Just think, okay, what's Hashem teaching me here? Obviously don't deserve to have the food straight away. Maybe I've kept someone waiting in my time. Understand the way to start looking at life, that life's a mirror where Hashem's constantly giving you messages. And the message is never, you deserve. The message is never, I'm entitled. The message is always, I'm here to be of service. So that's the end of chapter 17. We finished another chapter tonight. Awesome. Please God, next week, with Hashem's permission, it's going to be chapter 18. Thank you so much for